Hi, Janice.
Hi, Anthony. How are you doing today?
I'm well, and you?
Wonderful.
Let's talk about 11 mortifying home buyer behaviors that make real estate agents cringe. This is going to be a fun one, don't you think?
I'm actually kind of excited, I have to be honest.
All right,
This makes me laugh.
mortifying. That's strong, mortifying.
Right.
So this is from Realtor.com, and it's written by Cathie Ericson. Thank you, Cathie. Great article for us to talk about. And Janice, why don't you get us started?
Absolutely. So this article just makes me laugh. It's talking about what not to do when you're buying a home, which at first when I read this, I went, wow, they really had to write this down. And then I thought, wow, this all must have happened if they had to write this down. So number one, you broke something in a seller's home, part one. So, right. So they give the example of just because you play the air guitar doesn't mean you're supposed to pick up the client's Les Paul and showcase your version of a song. And you drop the guitar, it's going to cost you a lot of money. And the only thing I could think of is don't touch.
What's a Les Paul? Is that like an expensive guitar?
Oh, yeah. It's like the best of the best guitar, and it is not cheap.
And they broke it. That's hilarious.
Right. It's great, hilarious for this story, but I'm sure it wasn't very funny for the clients on both sides. But, I think of pretend you're a toddler. Do not touch. Do not touch.
All right. I'm sorry. Devil's advocate. Why are they leaving it out, the sellers?
Okay. It's a good point.
I mean, just if it's like a Stradivarius violin, right? Why would you leave it out during an open house?
All right. That's a good point. But either way, don't touch it.
Agree.
Right.
Cool. Can we
look at it?
Next, what's the second mortifying mistake?
Right. So you broke something in a seller's home, part two. This one wasn't, I guess it's funny. It's just they talk about a client trying to test the shower pressure during a showing. So they ended up breaking off the faucet handle. The water wouldn't turn off and they flooded the bathroom. They said, just wait for the inspector to look at that kind of thing. So not funny. I get things happen. But how do you feel about that? Like turning on the faucet or flushing toilets when you're in like an open house?
It feels like a very innocent mistake. I mean, I guess the broker is correct. I mean, that's something for the inspector to do, right? I mean, you don't want to. I don't know how I feel about it. What is your personal thought on that, Janice?
At first, the number one where it says don't pick up the Les Paul, I thought, well, duh, you don't touch that. And the second one, I'm like, well, I don't know that they were doing it maliciously. They just wanted to make sure the shower worked and but I guess it goes back to just don't touch anything, just look around.
So a big thing in Manhattan is looking in closets because closet space is like gold in Manhattan. So if it's one of those fancy sliding doors or accordion doors, a problem might happen. Something might jiggle or break. So I can see that happening. I mean, not so much faucets, but I'm kind of sympathetic to this home buyer.
Yeah, like maybe it's just they didn't mean to do it, but just how about don't touch? If you can go without, but.
Cool. Number 3, you were late for the umpteenth time.
Oh, this is just maybe my own personal pet peeve, but I grew up where if you're on time, you're late. You should always be a few minutes early.
Hold on.
Kind of common.
Janice, do you know who Tom Coughlin is?
I probably should.
He was the former head coach of the New York Giants American football team. And yes, he had something called Coughlin time, where if a meeting was at 3:00, you were late if you weren't there at 2:55.
But that's absolutely correct. You don't show up somewhere at 3:00 if it starts at 3. You should definitely be early. But that's what I think. I'd rather sit in the car for 5 minutes waiting to walk in than just be late. That's just me. But it's common courtesy. Just be on time. Or if things happen, like you said, you're in New York, there's traffic. If you didn't account for it or there's like an accident, just call them. Mm-hmm. Just make sure that you're there. It also talks about canceling is even worse because the homeowners have most likely cleaned and prepared. And I can tell you, when I sold one of my homes at one point in my life, we showed it 24 times and had 3 open houses. Now that's just a whole nother story.
That's a
lot.
But
every time we had to clean, prepare. I had 4 children. This isn't exactly easy. And then when they canceled, the frustration was just, it was heartbreaking because you work so hard. So just be on time, or if you have to cancel, give some notice. Common courtesy, really.
I mean, yeah, that's my response as well. This feels like common sense or common courtesy, but I guess if it was common, everyone would know, right? But
Right. That's a whole nother story about missing out on the common sense. But
All right, number 4, you ripped up the carpets to see what was underneath. I mean, did this actually happen?
Apparently, they like to said, you're not on HDTV. You can't really just run in and see if there's hardwood underneath, is what they were saying. In your book, you mentioned, if there's an area rug, you can lift it up and peek under there, but you don't want to pull up the carpet where it's, tacked into the wall and pulled taut. You just don't do that. Maybe you ask them later on if what's underneath, but you don't. That seems like you broke something. That wasn't an accident. You pulled it up. You probably messed up the carpet in there. Don't do it.
Let me take out my keys and chip away some of this paint to see if there's anything behind there.
Right. What's behind the walls or shiplap? You're not on HGTV. Let's just look around, ask questions if you have to, but let's not pull things up.
I guess these brokers have great stories. All right, number 5.
They are.
And by the way, we're still on the topic of home buying. Just to remind everyone, I'll be publishing my guide, how to buy your perfect first home on Amazon, I think next week, December 5th. So make sure you check that out. And hopefully this will be helpful for any folks who are listening who are thinking about getting in the market. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great, easy read. I'm looking forward to other people getting their hands on that. And going back to this article, these are stories from all over the place. Texas, New York, Georgia. So it's not just happening in one area. This is all over, which is crazy to me.
I guess nationwide we have this in common. These egregious mistakes we make.
this common courtesy issues and manners. But so number 5 is you brought your dog and it went bananas. Okay, don't bring your dog. Okay, service dogs. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about you just want to bring Fido and to go with you to look at a house. It's just a bad idea. For all kinds of reasons. You don't know what kind of pets that they already have there. Like I said, when we were showing our house, we had a cat. Well, if your dog doesn't like cats, that's going to be a problem. So, just rule number 1, don't bring your dog. It seems like, I don't know, call me crazy, but doesn't that seem pretty, don't do it?
So, in Manhattan, or from my experience, there's a correlated or related issue that's a little dicier. And it's bringing a young baby.
Oh.
So for parents, it might not be, in their budget, or they might not have anyone to babysit, so they could go to open houses. So totally get that. I'm sympathetic to that.
Absolutely.
But I've been to open houses with screaming and wailing babies. And,
we've all been there.
Right? And younger babies might be prone to what? Let's call them explosive diapers. Where are you going to change that in the open house?
Think of that.
And what if there's also colicky babies or babies that tend to spit up? And so it's touchy because, again, I've had, I think you and I have both have had young kids and we're sympathetic, but maybe it's not appropriate to lug them around to various people's homes.
I could see the flip side of both, where you might not have a choice, but if you do happen to have a choice, it might be best. But just don't bring the dog. I don't know. I go back to this. Don't bring the dog. Now, maybe you arrange something at another time if you're buying it. I don't even know if that works. Why would you bring the dog? You're going to be moving in. The dog will figure it out. That's just my thought.
I don't know. Some people are pretty beholden to their pets. Like, oh, well, we wouldn't make an offer unless Fido loved it,
I love my pets. I get that, but they're not helping me buy the house. And unless they pay for the mortgage, then they don't have a say.
Unless they're signing something, right?
Correct. Exactly. So number 6 is you lowballed badly. I guess you have to expect that. I don't know. This is maybe one of those you can help me with, that, when you go in at the asking price, and this is where having a professional comes in, because I am not a professional. But so I'm sure they will steer you in the direction of not lowballing, so where it's embarrassing. Like several years ago when the market crashed, that might be different, but we're in a different world right now. Maybe you could help me with this one.
I kind of disagree with this one pretty strongly, only because, being in the New York City area, I think some of the asking prices are offensive.
Interesting. Okay.
And I don't mean in my day, a soda cost a nickel. And I'm not talking about that sort of mentality, but rather even looking at the comparables, there's this sort of assumption that the market will hockey stick and jump forward, and that's what they're pricing based on. And even if I put in a what I think is a reasonable offer, it'll be 10% below what they're asking. And it's, who's the one being offensive there, right?
Right. But you know what? It goes back to the professional, because you would know to look at the comps and see what it is. And
True.
so you're maybe not lowball, but maybe that's more of a fair.
More like bringing them back to reality, kind of.
Right. Absolutely. But your basis is fact. You're in research, not like, hey, I'm going to just lowball it. So that makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
And actually, to be fair, in those scenarios, the listing broker, meaning the broker who's representing the seller, is probably appreciative to get those offers, because they probably know that their client is, out on a limb, and they need to show them, hey, look, these are the offers that come in. These are actual offers. What you're asking for is to the moon,
It's unrealistic.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Oh, interesting spin on that one. Thanks.
Sure.
And then number 7, you cheaped out on the earnest money deposit. So maybe you can help me with this one, going back to the professional.
So traditionally, the earnest money is what you put down with the contract. Okay, so let's make these. There's a difference between earnest money and down payment. Down payment is you will ultimately pay, let's say, 20%, and the bank will ultimately pay 80% of the purchase price. So I'm going to use a round number, $1 million, just because I'm not so great at math. So then you're saying I will eventually pay $200,000 of the purchase price, and the bank will pay or lend $800,000. Now, earnest money is what you put down with the contract to bind both sides to the commitment that we're going to try to close on this deal, right? And it's usually 10% or half of your down payment if you're doing 20%. So again, in my example, on $1 million property, you eventually have to pay $200,000 out of your pocket with $800,000 financing. But when you signed the contract, you would typically put down 10% or $100,000, right? And at the closing, you'd put down the other $100,000, and the bank would bring the $800,000. Are you with me so far on the math?
Absolutely. So what you're saying is, on this $1 million home, I shouldn't put down $100.
Exactly, because that shows zero commitment. And the seller knows if you decide at the last minute to walk away, you don't care, because you're out $100. But if you walk away at the last minute, you'd be out $100,000. That shows your commitment to the deal.
That makes sense.
Yep. And that's what earnest money is. Did I explain that well? Did I over-explain that?
No, not actually. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
And yes, the author's point makes sense. If you put down a very chintzy amount, it shows the seller you're not that interested. You want to keep your options open.
Right, and like you said, it makes sense. If I put down $100 on $1 million home, what's to keep me there? I mean, what's $100? That's a night out, barely in New York. But no, you're absolutely right. So that takes us to 8. You pulled a 180 during negotiations. So you've gone through the whole process saying that you're not concerned with what the inspection uncovered because you're handy. And then when you're sitting down to make the offer, now all of a sudden you want the seller to fix everything at their own cost. So it's like you said one thing, and then it was time, and you did something completely different. I guess it's rude, but that's where, having a professional comes in, I think, too, because they're going to steer you to, okay, this is what you should do, and you really shouldn't change it. That's kind of what I think. Again, going back to the professional.
I can't say anything on this because I see this all the time.
I bet.
And what it usually boils down to is good cop, bad cop. The broker's the good cop, the real estate attorney's the bad cop. And the buyer will, wants to get the deal done, right? And gets into contract, and the broker will sweet talk to get into the contract. And I don't mean to make this sound so nefarious, and then when it comes down to the nitty gritty, and these are a small percentage of what the total purchase price is, so it's usually not that big of a deal, but it is, people want to stand their ground. Like, why should I pay for that, right? And the attorney will be the bad cop when they're negotiating the contract and we're really finalizing things. The attorney will be the one who says, no, we're not paying for that. I mean, I don't care what the broker said. We're not paying for that.
Right.
So that's what I mean by good cop, bad cop.
Makes sense. Thanks. Number 9, you asked way too many questions. So I kind of agree. I kind of disagree with this one. They were making the point that they had somebody ask what was the energy wattage of each light bulb. Okay, that's just kind of annoying. Then they said to the insulation factor, what was the thickness of the drywall? Okay, maybe, but you could probably get that information on the inspection. So I think this is funny, but I kind of disagree with this one. You probably want to ask some questions, but if you really want to know the wattage of a light bulb, just look at it. Or replace all the light bulbs when you get in, if you're that concerned about the wattage, because they're going to burn out anyway. But I think asking questions is important, but don't ask too many. Maybe don't ask ridiculous ones. That would be my thought on number 9.
So my take on that is sort of from an economist's point of view, in that everything has a price. So if that's the kind of buyer you're going to be, just expect to pay a little bit more than a normal person.
Yeah.
Because people have to deal with you.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that might be the same person that's going back to one of the first numbers that isn't showing up on time. And
right on.
Yeah, exactly. And then number 10, you procrastinated on making a decision. So this happens all the time. I mean, you find a beautiful home and you really want it, and then you just wait, and then it gets sold out from underneath of you, and it happens. And this gentleman from New York says, ask yourself, will I be upset if somebody else nabs this property because I wasn't fast enough? So I guess this one isn't as funny, because it is true. You got to make the decision and figure out what you want to do. Oh, not fast, but I mean, I guess sooner it's going to be, you don't want it to be taken out from under you.
You need, it really is an internal decision, and the relationship between you and your finances and the home that you're, quote unquote, falling in love with. I mean, if you're getting pressure to make a decision on the spot and you're just not comfortable with that, even though you love the home, then maybe it's not the right home for you, right? So it just kind of depends on the situation. Absolutely.
And I'm sure that can be frustrating for the realtor that is all excited that it wants to be this house, but then they wait and then they lose it. So I can see how that would be a little bit frustrating. But I don't know if it's...
I'm sorry. I like what you said. I don't know if it was you or if you're quoting the article, but if you can't pull the trigger and you're okay with losing the house, if somebody swoops in while you're making your decision, then it's not, quote unquote, the one, or at least not yet. Yeah.
Right. And that was actually the article that I quoted. It was a gentleman out of New York that had it happen to. So I don't know that that's mortifying. That's more just like not great decision making, or having a plan.
Agree.
Now, number 11.
I love this one.
Would be the epitome of mortifying. It says number 11, and finally you use the potty. Okay. You can insert bathroom humor here, but there's emergencies. Fine, but could we just don't use the bathroom? I don't even know why anyone would think to go to an open house. And, I don't know, around you, there's a Wawa on every corner. You could go to the Wawa or something, but that is actually pretty mortifying. Could you?
No, I have done this. So I am, I guess, guilty of this one. But in my defense, it's not like there's a lot of public bathrooms in Manhattan, right?
Oh, that's okay. Little different scenario. Yeah, you don't have the Wawas on every corner. But, maybe have a little coos if you have to. I don't know, but just kind of look at it as for emergencies or last resorts only. Like you said, there's not a lot of bathrooms in Manhattan. Fine. But
that being said, in Manhattan, most high-rise buildings and whatnot will have like a lobby bathroom or something. So that's always an option. Yeah.
Right. Ask your realtor if there's another option before destroying the bathroom. I don't know. That one just that one is mortifying to me. I don't know if I could bring myself. So honestly,
yes, if I was open housing, I wouldn't love that either. If I was the seller,
because then the next 50 people that come through are like, what is wrong with this place? It probably won't help your the sale. But anyway, yes, that was definitely a good way to end the article with mortifying homebuyer behaviors. All right. It's a great article. It was funny.
Yes. Thank you again to Cathie Ericson of writing for Realtor.com. This one was fun. Hope we get another one like this. Again, my book, the book on how to buy your perfect first home, will be on Amazon next week. Check it out. And otherwise, thanks again, Janice. We'll talk again soon.
We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Bye now.